Hello, and welcome to Time with Tina. I'm glad you could join me today. And let me get started by wearing my glasses. I've noticed in my other videos that there's a lot of background noise going on here, and you may hear the fish tank. I have a fish tank nearby, and I also have people walking back and forth, and I'm definitely not doing this video with a lot of privacy. So I'm sorry for all the background noise. And sometimes I'm just disorganized, I'm just got everything a mess, but sorry for that. I am improving, but I hope that you got something out of those videos regardless. Anyway, today's subject is the Good Samaritan. And I'm sure you have heard that story. Even people who don't necessarily read their Bibles, they might have heard of the Good Samaritan story, but I'm here to talk about the Good Samaritan because I feel like this kind of person is very lost in this world. Very lost. I mean, if you think about the world nowadays, you know, um, with so much crime and everything being filmed now, you can film a lot of people being brutalized or bad things happening in the world. And it is the same with, crime or just two people fighting. You know, I, I was once a summer camp counselor not too long ago, actually, and I remember taking the kids on one of our field trips, and these were kids about 10, 9. No one was more than 11 years old. I think the age was 10, 9, 8, and these were young kids I was with. And well, one time we were waiting outside. It was very hot because it's summertime. And two of these kids got into a fight. And of course, I tried to break them up. But the other kids, the ones who had cell phones, took out their phones and recorded while the other kids chant, "Fight, fight, fight, fight." They were just chanting this nonstop. And I remember thinking to myself, what in God's name is going on here? I'm trying to break up this fight, and these little kids was egging this fight on, recording it and chanting "fight, fight, fight." And I think that was my first lesson and understanding how the world has changed. Now that we are recording violence rather than helping people when violence happened to them. And there are a lot of stories like this where there were things happening to one person and no one really stopped anything from happening. Actually, let me turn on my light. I forgot I didn't even put my light on. Isn't that odd? Yeah, I see you better. Hopefully, you see me better. But yeah, but this is the world we're living in where we see things going wrong to people, bad things happening to people, and we don't step in anymore. We're now recording it. And these are things such as people being um, beaten up violently. I noticed also that sometimes when women are being beaten up by men or seeing that sort of situation, people do step in to help. But if it's a man beating up another man or two men beating up a man, nobody really gets involved in that. They just watch. Or if it's two girls fighting, they don't do anything. They just watch. And that is why I feel like the story of the Good Samaritan is lost on us as a society. Now that we're just not helping anymore, we're just recording and maybe even liking what we see, talking about it to our friends. Oh man, did you see that fight going on? And getting all excited about somebody getting beat up or hurt, but we're not. really stepping in to help that person. Maybe after the fact, we would help them, but not trying to break up something that can potentially get someone hurt really bad. I don't see much of that. And here's the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, there's a lot to the story of the Good Samaritan. I'm not even sure if I'm going to read the whole thing to you, but I think I will, just so you can understand the story of the Good Samaritan if you don't already know. Now, before we get to the parable, it's a parable, one of Jesus' parable. Before we get to that, there was a young man that came to Jesus who wanted to know how can he get into the kingdom of heaven. Young man, wealthy, and Jesus told him that what is written in the law, how do you read it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that is what we learned from Jesus. Jesus is telling this young man, the first thing you need to do is love the God, Lord your God. The second thing you need to do is love your neighbor as yourself. And then that's when Jesus gets into the parable of the Good Samaritan. So let's read. Jesus replied to him because this young man was not satisfied with Jesus' answer. So Jesus tells him this parable. A young man was going down from Jerusalem to Judea when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So did a Levite when he came to the place and saw him pass by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn to take care of him. For the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these three do you think a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And of course, that is not what's been happening here. That is not been what is happening here. Now, in this day and age, it may happen once in a while, but I think so much of things that you see on the news or on videos, you see now that people have been just recording people being in fights. I mean, and sometimes the fights are very brutal, where it's one person being attacked by 2 or 3 people, and nobody's really stepping in. There was this incident that happened in a boat dock, and it was this worker who was being attacked by practically a whole family. And he was alone at the time, but you see this young man swimming to his rescue. You see people coming over, people who were on the other side of the road coming over, trying to help this man because, you know, they were trying to do something. And a lot of people saw that and were thinking, wow, that is great. That is great. People stepped in to help this young man do his, because he was just doing his job. He didn't deserve to be attacked. But that was the first time I saw in a long time people stepping in to help someone. And I'm thinking to myself, why isn't there more of that? Why don't we have more people helping them? I remember a long time ago, I was coming from church service, I think, and I was with a friend, a male friend, and he was taking me home, and we stopped at a red light. And I looked over on the other side, and there was these 2 young girls fighting, and it was, oh my God, I was thinking, oh my God, they could get hurt. And one of the girls had the other one right where she wanted him. She got her on the ground. But when she got her on the ground, she started kicking her in the face. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like, we gotta stop it. This girl could get hurt. We gotta do something. So I put my hand on the car to get out to stop. And he said, don't get out this car. Don't get out this car. And the red light turned green and he spin off. He took off in this car. And I'm like, I'm looking back to see what's going on, but for some reason that bothered me. That angered me. I was angry at the man who I knew very well, who was taking me home, being kind enough to take me home from church. And I was angry he did that. I was angry that he did not want to stop and do anything to help this girl who was getting stomped in the face. Although there was an apartment building nearby to where this incident happened, and a couple was sitting on the steps. They also did nothing. They were just sitting there watching this girl get stomped in the face. And I'm thinking to myself, and I knew that, I should have gotten over it, but it happened a while ago, and to this day, I still remember it like it happened yesterday because it bothered me so much that people were around, that even the guy I was with who was driving the car, that none of them stopped to do anything to help this person. This girl was being stomped in your face, and I wondered about that. The man I've known for a long time, sitting next to me, you know, I wondered, okay, do I really know this person? I'm going out of tinge because of this, but I would have thought him better of than that, and would just want to help someone, or just say, hey, stop it, or yell, stop it, or do something, someone would call the police, or, whatever. But no, he just drove off. And that had bothered me for a long time because I'm thinking, well, suppose that could have been me. Suppose that could have been my daughter. Suppose that could have been my mother, my brother, someone that I knew was getting hurt and no one stepped in to help. And I think that's what bothered me. And when I questioned the person who was driving the car, I asked, why didn't you want to stop to help that girl? And he said, I was on a schedule. I had to take you home. I had to do this. I had to do that. So that's why I didn't stop. And, that was his answer. So I had to leave it alone. But it bothered me. And I let him know I think we should have just stopped or done something to help that girl because, she could have been terribly hurt. And, but, so I had to let that go. And I had to think about, and that's when I actually really thought about the Good Samaritan. What happened to them? What happened to the Good Samaritans of this day and age? If it was our friends or family, of course we would get involved and help. But if it's a stranger on the street, why would we just watch and not help this person who would? I mean, I get it. I get that nobody wants to get involved. We don't know that the danger in getting involved. So, we don't know what could happen to us if we get involved. And I get that. I understand. You have to take precaution and be helpful, and you could call the police or you can just, but just to sit and watch, chewing on your gum like you're watching a movie, you know, that I that I don't think is right. I don't think that's what God would want from his people or anyone. You know, when George Floyd was had his when George Floyd had his neck broken, by a police officer. Everyone saw this. It was filmed right in front of our eyes, and everyone saw this. And I know people who saw this were thinking, oh my God, if I were there, I would have helped, I would have done something. But these were police officers. What could you have done? These are police officers there to serve and protect. What can you do if it's a police officer harming someone you know? What can you do then? And these are the things we have to think about because also, in this day and age, there isn't a lot. There's a lot of recordings and a lot of talking conversations. There's a lot of things that we didn't know now. We didn't know back then. I definitely didn't know a lot of things were going on in the 80s because we barely had any cell phones in the 80s, or we barely had any computers in the 80s. I remember in high school, we had a computer class, and that was the only class we had computers in. And I thought this is a big deal because we got computers in these classes. Nowadays, kids are practically doing their whole entire schoolwork on computers. Everyone in my daughter's school got a computer when the pandemic happened. Everyone, you know. But when I went to school, going to that computer room was a big deal, because that was the only computer I ever saw. But now we see all these terrible things happening online. And it's not so much the terrible things that are happening, it's the people that are around these terrible things happening and just not really doing much to help. And so, that old saying, people know this saying, but they probably don't know that it came from the Bible. It's in Luke 6, verse 31. Let me pin my Bible to this. Luke 6:31. It says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is it to you?" So there you have it. There you have it. We know we can love our brothers and sisters, our mothers, aunts, and uncles. If we see somebody harming them, we would step in. We would be like with our bats and our clubs, "What are you doing? What are you doing to my sister, man?" We'd be ready to fight them and do all we can. But if it was a stranger, what would we do? But you have to remember that stranger is also somebody's brother or sister or aunt or uncle or mother or father, child. What would you do? And this is what Jesus, there's a lot of talk about loving your neighbors as yourself. People would be surprised at how much Jesus talks, because that is the second commandment he gives Christians, to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. You ever wonder sometimes why you get the short end of the stick sometimes? As I said, more men are likely to help women than men helping another man. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because men are macho and they're supposed to take care of themselves and defend themselves. But if a man is fighting 2 or 3 men at a time, I think we should do something to help. Call the police or something, because that doesn't seem like a fair fight, and that's it's not being a good Samaritan. And like I said, I understand that we have to be careful nowadays of getting involved with people getting involved in fights, confrontations, because we don't know. We don't know. It could lead to us being injured or hurt ourselves because that's the way it's becoming now, where violence is very much out in the open. And we do have to protect ourselves. So if you feel as if this situation here is too violent, let me just call someone for help. Maybe someone, police or someone, could help this situation. You know, but we can always do something other than just watch and just watch and then talk about it later. You know, one time when I was a little girl, I lived in a project, as I've said before, I lived in a project. You see a lot of violence in projects, you do. But one time I was coming home from the store, and this happened outside the projects. I walked past this man, and then as I was entering the projects, I heard this man scream. And I looked over, and he was being robbed. He was being robbed by these two men. And I remember the look on one of the men that was robbing him. He just looked evil. He looked evil. He was doing something. Seemed like he was stabbing the man. I don't know what he was doing, but he was looking at the man he was attacking with such an evil expression on his face. They'll never forget how he looked. I got so frightened about what I saw, I ran home. And I told my mom, I said, Mom, there's a man being mugged outside. What should we do? And she said, Oh, honey, every people getting mugged all the time. Did they see you? Did the mugger see you? I was like, I don't think so. And then she went back outside with me and gone. Everybody was gone. There was the man who was mugged was gone, and the two men that mugged him was gone. It was like nobody was there. And I was like, how could they have, the situation was cleared up quickly. I don't know what happened to that man. I don't know what happened to the two men. I looked back and forth and did not see anything. It's like they disappeared. And I think I was only upstairs in my house for 10 minutes, but what happened during that time was all over. It was over. And but I still remember it. And yes, I think I was about 12 or 13 hours. This was a very long time ago. When I was very young, but I still remember it. And I still remember the evil look that man who was mugging this other man in the face. And it terrified me. I don't think I wanted to go outside anymore, because of what I saw. It really was traumatic. But if you think about, I just passed that same man on the street that was mugged. What if that could have been me and no one was there to help? Or what if somebody was there to help? I was a little girl and was terrified by what I was seeing, but I did run home to my mom and let her know I saw something terrible, and she did go out with me, but the situation was gone, but you think about things like that, you know? You think about, what if it was you that needed some help, and would you have ran into a good Samaritan? This is what God asks of all of us, and this is probably why He said that the two greatest things He wants His people to do is love Him with all His heart and might, and the other one is to love your neighbors as Himself, because God knew there would be a time where there would be no love for your neighbors. God knew there would be a time where people will be getting hurt right in front of the cameras, and nothing will be done to help them at the time. God knew all of this. The parable talks about this wealthy religious. I think he was religious man of the law that approached Jesus, and he wanted to know. And he wasn't even satisfied with the answers. He's like, is that all? All I have to do is love you and love my neighbor? Is that all? But why do you think Jesus told him that parable? Because he knew that it is going to be difficult for us to love our neighbors. We can be loving to our family, we can be loving to our friends, but what about your neighbor? You know, would you help your neighbor in times of trouble?